Yeah. Hey. All right. Hey. Yeah, I mean.
So we about to take off.
Hey. Please do remain calm. About to run against it and with a little bit of soul, no times.
Welcome to Please Remain Calm. I'm Ben Gonzalez.
And I am Daniel Gonzalez. As always, folks, the opinions expressed here on the Please Remain Calm podcast are our own. They do not reflect the opinions of the Los Angeles City Fire Department or the Los Angeles County Department of Health Services.
They sure don't. Welcome back, Cotter.
Welcome back, man. 100 episodes.
Yeah, this is our 100th episode. We took a little hiatus to get to here, but now we're lining up some more shows, some more interesting guests, and we've got an awesome one on today.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Just like Ben said, you know, as we're getting closer to 100 episodes, you know, we're trying to think of somebody good that can fill those shoes of a 100th episode.
Here we go.
And today we have with us Engineer Don Nash from Los Angeles City Fire Department. Say hi, Don.
Hello, everyone.
So, little history on with Don. I've been trying to get Don. We've been, you know, kind of
About 6 months now.
Yeah,
Getting close to that.
playing phone tag and trying to get him on the podcast for about 6 months or so. We go way back. I would say next to my dad, I probably go farther back with Don Nash than anybody else that I know on the fire department.
Yeah, because you were still in high school.
Yeah, I was I was a junior in high school.
Yeah.
This was 1996.
Yeah.
When
3 lifetimes ago.
yeah,
Like a lot
when
of-
Don started
lot of pounds
the
ago for me, but
Yeah, right.
yeah.
when Don started the Explorer Post at Fire Station 63, and heard about it while I was at school and came down and joined, and that's how I met Don. It's really one of the first, aside from like going and visiting Dad at the station and like hanging out there for family and stuff. It was my first really experience being somewhat a part of the fire department. You know, where I had certain responsibilities at the fire station, where I got a better sense of like the hierarchy and the totem pole of what it meant to be part of this thing called.
You had
the
a
fire
uniform,
department.
you had boots.
Uniform, boots. I mean, it was the first time. Like I can remember standing. You know, it was just Dickies pants and a blue, you know, cotton shirt. It wasn't even Nomex or anything like that. A light blue cotton shirt with the patch. But I can remember standing in the mirror in that uniform and looking at myself and thinking like, holy shit. You know, I'm damn near a firefighter at this point. You know what I mean?
You're going to go on some calls and everything.
Yeah. So it's a long time coming. We're really happy to have you here. Aside from knowing each other in that capacity, Don has done a lot on the fire department, has worn a lot of hats as well. Firefighter, paramedic, he's an engineer. He worked on Engine 51 at LAX and was ARF certified, which is, aircraft firefighting. And aside from that, he also works with the Historical Society, the LAFD Historical Society. So we have a lot to talk about today with him. Very, very interesting guy and a lot of interesting stuff to talk about.
Yeah, totally. Really looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us, Don.
All right. It's a pleasure being here, and I feel pretty privileged to be the 100th episode. with
Yeah,
you
man.
guys.
Yeah,
You know,
man.
This is awesome.
We couldn't waste
You
this
know.
slot on anybody, you know?
You know what?
Yeah.
Glad that 6 months went by and all that stuff, and I got to do the 100th.
Yeah, there you go, right?
Finally.
Yeah.
Play the
Finally
cards
made it.
just right.
Yeah. Plus, this was such a beautiful day outside. You know, driving over here. I mean, it was like 30-mile visibility, really
Yeah.
clear. Saw a guy on a bicycle riding on a 101 today, and then saw one of those little robots. You know, it was like a cool
food
robot?
driving around dropping off
Yeah.
food. I never saw that before.
Yeah, they got them around here.
A pretty, interesting day today, but just a beautiful day. And,
Yeah, man.
I'm proud of you guys, man. I mean, shit, we've known each other forever.
Yeah,
I was in my mid-20s
Yeah.
when, we
we
started
all
the
met.
post, and now
Yep.
I'm like 53. I just had my 53rd birthday 2 weeks ago. And, things like getting up in the morning, you just, you don't take for granted anymore.
Yeah.
You
See, and it's interesting too because it's like full circle now that you're at 63s. Is there still an Explorer Post
It really
there now?
is.
There was.
There isn't anymore
Okay.
right now.
Oh,
But
but dissolved?
Yeah.
well, the pandemic kind of screwed everything up. with
That's
that.
right. But you were still working with them when it was there.
And then Rob Hayes
Took it over.
retired.
Yeah.
You know, he was running it pretty well and had his son, little Robbie,
Mm-hmm.
and his group of friends, and all those guys are hired now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Robbie's
Yeah.
with Orange County Fire.
Mhm.
Feldman got hired with LA City. All those guys have gotten hired. So,
That's
Yeah.
awesome, man. That's
but
awesome.
but it's a testament to how important a program like that is. You know what I mean? I can't tell you how many guys that I work with that I knew coming up as an explorer, or going to like an explorer muster and meeting all these people that you're seeing at tests that you're taking and stuff like that, or you get into paramedic school, you know, and it's guys that you knew from explorers or from being around the musters and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, it was I probably wouldn't have got hired on a job had I not been part of the Explorer program in the mid '80s. You know, because I came on the job when I was 20 years old. I took my test when I was 19 and took my oral interview when I was 19.
Man.
And so, you know, joined the post. I was 15 years old when I joined it. So I was 4 years in and I was getting groomed by the firefighters and stuff and knowing what Firehouse life is like before I took the test. Because when I went into the interview, one of the questions they asked me was like, you know, the average age of a firefighter come on is like 28, 29. This person's had some life experiences and all this and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You're only 19. Why should we hire you? You know?
Yeah.
And I don't forget what I said.
They knew a trade, you know, that's like how the fire department hired.
They were in the military, you know, they did construction or whatever. And back then, you know, if you came on a job in the mid 80s and prior to that, you didn't have a prior like roughneck career, like, you know, pouring concrete, something
plumber,
like that, no plumber,
millwright,
working in construction or prior military, man, your probation was going to be rough.
Yeah.
And so I remember one of the questions they asked me that, and I already told them about the being an explorer and all that. And I basically, I think I said something to the point where I had no commitments. You know, I could devote everything to the fire department or something like that, but it got me through.
What even got you in the door you were an explorer at 66s, old 66s, on Florence and South Central. What even got you in the door thinking, hey, this might be something that I want to do in the mid 80s?
You know what? Childhood dream.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, since I was knee high to a grasshopper, man, I wanted to be a fireman when I first saw my fire truck.
Yeah.
Was that your neighborhood growing up?
No. My grandparents live in Venice. My dad's side of the family's from Venice.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So let me back up a little bit. When we moved here from Wisconsin in the early 70s, we stayed with my grandparents for a little bit. Then we moved to South Central in 46th district.
Oh, okay.
And we stayed there for a while. And like 81 or 82 or something, we moved over to Willowbrook, which is County 41's district, right behind Martin Luther King Hospital.
Right.
And I went to school in Compton, graduated out of Centennial High School in Compton. But the biggest thing that was a motivator for me was that TV show Emergency. Like so many people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Us too.
Yeah. A little ass kid. Every Saturday, 8 o'clock, Channel 4.
Guarantee.
Yeah. Either on the black and white TV back then in the bedroom or the color TV in the living room.
Yeah. Hold the antenna with your toes.
Yeah. You know, rabbit ears, turn, you know, hold this way, hold your left foot up, and then, you know, you got everything. You get reception. And so it started with that. And then I got in with the Explorer program. And you might remember, this was a very ill-fated TV show. It was called Code Red. And
I remember Code Red.
Yeah.
They had an Explorer on that show.
Yeah, Explorer on the show.
I thought you were going to say Cop Rock.
What's his name? He just passed away 2 weeks ago.
The kid that played the Explorer?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The kid from Eight is Enough. It was the youngest kid. That's
Adam
right.
Rich. He just passed away, like, I want to say less than a week ago.
Oh,
that's crazy.
Yeah. So I was watching the TV show because I was a big LA City fan back then when I was a kid because that's the fire department I wanted to be on. And a few months before we moved, they had the Standard Fabrics fire on Hoover and 58th Street down the street from my house when I was a kid. And they poured water on that place for like 3 days. And then it rekindled a bunch of times. So, you know, we would ride our bikes over there and watch them, you know, ladder pipe it for a half a day and stuff. And we'd get to talk to the firefighters and they were very receptive to us back then.
Just in awe.
Just in awe watching this. And I'm like, dude, I can do this. I can do this. I was like 11 years old.
Yeah.
So going back to the TV show, this kid on there riding along. So I didn't know it was true or not. I thought it was some Hollywood BS. I'm like, there's no way they're going to have some kid riding on a fire truck going to structure fires. I'm like, this is some bullshit right here. But looked into it, actually called the fire department, LAFD, non-emergency number. I was 14 years old. And asked about it. And they says, yeah, where do you live? I'm like, I live in Willowbrook. Let's see where the closest Explorer post is to your house. So 66s, I called up 66s. And then the Explorer advisor at the time, his name was Isaac Burks. And I just turned 14. And I call him, speak to him, and he's like, so how old are you? 14. Oh, man, you got to be 15.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, what? I just turned 14, so I had to wait a whole year. So that was kind of excruciating because I really wanted to get started. And at that time, I kind of killed time with that, joining the high school JROTC and playing football and stuff like that. So fast forward, long story longer, joined the Explorer program, got to meet a lot of cool people, a lot of the explorers that, you know, we had over the years. I think everybody except for one guy got hired on the job.
Yeah. Nice.
Except for one guy, and he got shafted, basically. His whole family was in Pedro, you know, long history, longshoreman and stuff like that. Yeah. He was a good dude. He worked at the shops and everything, and they did him wrong. Yeah. They really did him wrong. The rest of us, we got hired.
And the Explorer program was pretty well established at that point?
Yeah, I want to say the program started in 78. Don't quote me on this.
Okay.
Then they got some traction, and it was sponsored by the Boy Scouts of America.
Boy Scouts, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Now it's learning. Now it's the city sponsors it.
Yeah, it's a cadet program
because
now.
It's called a cadet program because Explorer is a trademark or something like that they can't use. And that all came about the issue with the Lambda Legal incident, you know, because they came and sued the fire department.
Yeah.
And they sued all the Explorer programs because they were associated with the Boy Scouts of America. And that's another story for another
podcast. Could have a whole podcast with that.
Yeah.
Who knew?
And then, so, you know, just to get a little history about old 66s, on 1715 with Florence, it was built in 1929, and they finally closed it in 89 and moved over to a station on Slauson. And
it's still there. Building's still there.
Yeah, building's still there. I just, matter of fact, walked through it about 7 months ago because the shed next to it, you know, we still have some stuff that we do with it.
Oh, really?
But what I want to say, when the station was open, it had large oak manual doors.
Yeah.
And a lot of fire stations back then in the 80s still had them, old 29s. Old 21s did before they got manual doors. And there's a few other stations I can't think of. 39s, I think, had one.
Yeah.
So when we get a run, you walked over to the doors, you pull this little handle, and doors will, you know, open up, and they would get locked in place by these rods that were drug by the doors and locked into it.
So almost like big barn doors.
Yeah.
Huh? That swung open.
Yeah. And then, so when we went on structure fires and stuff like that, you would pull the rigs out on Florence, and as the rigs were pulling out, the firefighters would be suiting up on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
You know, and so the rigs pull out, guys will close the doors and then jump on the rigs and go.
And riding on the tailboard back then, too.
Yeah, riding on the tailboard.
Yeah.
I came in at the last end of that. When I started the post in 85, they were still riding the tailboards, and then they had an incident, or OSHA or NFPA, I don't remember, said you can't do it anymore, and then we went to riding in the jump seats.
Yeah.
The fire department did, because I wasn't on the job there at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
And then after that, I did.
Well, because guys used to get, there used to be a lot of injuries and stuff right on the tailboard.
What they would do is the four-way valve would be in the hose bed.
Yeah.
And they put the breathers in the hose bed. So when they were riding the tailboard to structure fire, they'd be putting on the breather, you know, they strapped in, of course. And then the rig will slow down to a crawl. They grab the four-way and step off of it, and they wrap the hydrant. The rig wouldn't even come to a complete stop, depending on where you were assigned.
Yeah.
And it was take off. And then, so one of the incidents I heard that somebody did that, lost their step, and basically cheese grated her face on the asphalt or something like that. That was one of the stories I heard.
Yeah.
And then there was a couple other incidents with injuries and stuff like that. And then they just said, you know, we're the only major fire department that's still doing this. Let's, you know, cut this shit out.
I can remember my dad telling us stories of like, you know, the engine pulling out, and dude wasn't strapped in yet, you know, trying to put his coat on as they're taking off, loses his footing, falls, on the apron. The pump's like, get out of the way, you know, hitting the air horn and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just a
different department.
Different department.
Yeah, no turnouts. They didn't wear turnouts. The department didn't go to turnouts like the late 80s after the incident over by the convention center. The convention center had a lot of pre-33 buildings around it before they did the expansion in the early 90s. I want to say 90, 91, they were doing the construction for it. So they were tearing a lot of those buildings down. I remember riding along, going drilling on the roofs and all that stuff of the buildings they were tearing down. And then they had a fire in one of those buildings, and they went in there. They didn't have one of the.
Was that Matsuo?
Yeah,
Matsuo got burned.
Yeah. And real bad burns. It basically got steamed.
Yeah,
you know, and then
fell through the floor. Right? Didn't he fall through a little bit? Wound up in a void space or something?
I heard that he got steamed some kind of way. I don't know the whole intricacies of what happened.
But no pants. He didn't have
no
pants on.
You just had your regular
to your knees.
Yeah, you just had your regular uniform pants.
Yeah,
and
they weren't even Nomex at that time, right? They were dungarees.
They were. It was right around the time they went from dungarees to the first generation Nomex.
Yeah,
and it was a transition time. So some guys had them, and some companies didn't. I want to say, but I was riding along that day at 64s.
Oh, really?
We had swapped districts with 5s.
Okay.
So we swapped districts with 5s, and we spent most of the day at the airport. Went over to 80s and stuff like that because they were saying, "Hey, if we get a full, you're going to come to LAX with us."
Right.
So we went over to 80s, and the security at the airport wasn't nothing like it was today. We just drove up, they opened the gate, we drove onto the airfield. And so we're at 5s. Captain calls a lineup and says, "Hey, they had a fire downtown." They had a fire downtown, and firefighter got burned severely. And we don't know how bad it is and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I want to say when I came and rolled back later, a few weeks later at 64s, everybody had full turnouts.
Yeah. Wow. It's it's funny. That's how the fire department is, though. It's completely reactionary. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Something terrible will happen, and it's like, whoa,
here's the new thing we're doing.
Whoa, we've been doing that wrong. Let's change this real quick.
Well, it's like everything. It's like, being a paramedic. You practice medicine, everything worked good for a while. Like mask suits, we used to carry the mask suits on the rescues when I first got there, and then figure out, we were killing people.
Yeah,
and all right, we're not doing that anymore. I'm still licensed as a medic, but I haven't practiced in a while, and there's so much different changes now from when I was at 63s on a rescue. Hell, we had paddles. Real paddles that we, now you
Clear.
just put
stickers
on them, and you press a button, you dial it up, and all right, clear, press a button, just
it's crazy how much things change over the years.
Yeah, certain meds we don't push anymore. There's new meds that we push now, and it's the same thing.
Being in the mid 80s, now you know, being a firefighter that came on early 2000s, right, 2003, and I was an explorer, obviously, with you, 96, 97. You always kind of looked at the guys that got on in the 80s. Like, it seemed like the 80s was like the era of like real men firefighters. You know what I mean? Like, everyone was like, everything was,
get a little phone call.
Everything was brass back then. It was heavier and
that's when our dad's talking shit.
Yeah.
How was being an explorer back then? We talk about the totem pole and being a low man on a totem pole, especially at a station like 66's that has a reputation of being a raw go-getter station.
I mean, there was
how much did they let you get in on things when you had incidents and stuff like that, or were you kind of the little baby brother on the outskirts?
We were basically the gophers. Go for this. Go get this. Go get that. They didn't really put us in any danger or anything like that because they couldn't. The antics that were going on in the firehouse back then that today probably people would do serious time for.
Yeah, you
were not really brought in. You weren't. You were kind of exposed to it, but they didn't include you in it. When they your last shift, they used to tie you up to a chair, and then house dudes would take a beating. The first was the
take all the contents of the fridge.
All the leftover food and all that stuff got dumped on you and all that. And that was just like a rite of passage. Just like if you crossed the equator in the Navy for the first time, you were polywog, and then you crossed the equator, and then they, did the same kind of thing. You became a shellback, right?
Right.
So it was kind of like that in the fire department, but that happened almost every time you left the station. And then there was other things that I really can't mention, because I don't want to incriminate anybody. But no, you had
definitely a different world.
There's a whole other historical society. It sounds like that we could have.
Different world, different type of firefighting.
Historical Society X.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. It's a historical society underground.
Yeah, it was fun because it's back then you're seeing how things are now, and I'm not saying things are bad. There's a lot of things that change for the better.
Yeah,
that I saw. Because back then I also learned what not to do.
Yeah,
and
there's a fine line between like tradition and things being okay because it's tradition and it's the way it's always been, and oh shit, we probably shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah,
right.
You know what I mean? It's a balancing act. Well, and these days it's harder and harder to stick with traditions. When they don't.
Well, the problem is, with a lot of things, especially stuff that gets real political. Things that need to be changed. Like certain cultural things need to be changed, but you overcorrect, and then it winds up snowballing the other direction, and not just the fire service, I think, our whole society's like that sometimes. Like, oh, just get rid of everything.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, we got to bring some of it back. That sort of thing.
There's nuance to everything.
Of course.
Exactly. Nothing's so black and white.
And
when at what point did you go paramedic? Were you a paramedic when you got hired, or did the department send you through?
No, I was an EMT for Goodhue Ambulance before I got on the job. I did that for a year and worked out of the Jefferson Station. It used to be on Jefferson and Hauser. And then I went to worked out of the Carson Station because I wanted to go on some 911 runs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The Jefferson Station were mainly interfacility transfers because we were just Metro Los Angeles, and LAFD had their own rescues and stuff, but they didn't.
Yeah.
Back then, the fire department had roughly 53 paramedic rescues, and then 800s didn't come on until like the late 80s, if that.
Yeah.
So they were just all paramedics, and there weren't that many. I give you an example of the paramedic holes they had, and the paramedic rescues would call for us to transport their patients that they didn't want to transport. And we would get our dispatch, and this is for rescue. They'll tell us this is for rescue 37 or rescue 69, because I worked the west side. That was my responsibility. And like, I'll give you an example. 92s was a task force, no rescues.
Right.
59s, single engine, no rescues. 62s, single engine, no rescues.
Yeah.
Who else? 94s, task force, no rescues.
Yeah.
34s had 2 rescues at the time, and there was the only when they started adding the 800s, and there was only 2 800s in the entire city that were paramedic rescues.
Yeah.
Was Rescue 865 and Rescue 834.
Oh, really?
In 91, they decided to make them 200 series rescues because they were getting confused with the EMT rescues.
Yeah.
And EMT rescues were being added. So that's another story I could tell you about that.
People don't realize how fairly new this like medical based fire department is.
Yeah.
Even when I first got on, or certainly when I was an explorer, it was paramedic was still almost like an outskirts kind of position on the fire department. It was, before in the 80s even, it was almost like the paramedics were completely separate from the rest of the firefighters.
They were kind of, because they were single function medics. Like when I came on the job, you got in 2 lines. You got in either the firefighter line or the paramedic line.
Yeah.
And the paramedics were civilians. They weren't sworn back then.
Yeah.
And the paramedic program started in 1970, with the Wentworth Townsend Act. The very first episode of Emergency talks about the Wentworth Townsend Act, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But not the LAFD, but the city of Los Angeles had a 3rd service. And they ran civilian ambulances.
Right.
They wore a police uniform, and they drove these ambulances around that were, before, there were different colors over the decades, but towards the end of their service, they were painted brown. They called them the brown bombers.
Yeah, brown bombers.
The EMTs.
Yeah.
And so they ran out of certain fire state. No, they didn't run out of any fire stations until 70, 71, but they ran out of Georgia Street, which is part of the new convention center. Where it's now, because that was one of the buildings that torn down. They ran out of Central Receiving Hospital. And then in the valley, they had firefighters working on ambulances because the brown bombers didn't run out of the valley.
Yeah.
I don't think. And they had private ambulance. On the West LA, Goodhue Ambulance was basically the 911 service for the city of Los Angeles in the early 70s when the paramedic program came up, because there weren't that many rescues in the city. The first paramedic rescue in the city was Rescue 53 down in the harbor.
53.
Yeah. And that's Fire Station 53, which is closed in 1995. And then Rescue 53, Engine Rescue and Phone Carrier 53 became Engine and Rescue Phone Carrier 112 when 112s opened up in 1995.
Okay.
So, but Rescue 53 was the first paramedic rescue in the city of LA. LA County Fire's first squad they ran out of Harbor General Hospital. And so back then, they didn't have, they had nurse ride-alongs that rode along with the units to basically give the medics orders, because they didn't have them yet, right? So they had to go watch them and stuff like that. And what was, at first, they get a run, go by the hospital, pick up the nurse, then go to the address. And then after that, the nurses started riding along. There was one nurse, her name is Carol Babout. I think she was one of the first instructors for the paramedic program when it began, and she rode along with Rescue 53, and she did 24-hour shifts. One of the stories she tells is how the guys play games for dishes, kept wasting time. We could have just went and did the dishes anyway, had been done.
Yeah.
And then, after that, the paramedics got more and more responsibilities. They could make base contact and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know what came first or whatever, so somebody's going to call you, say, hey, no, that wasn't how it went, but that it was somewhere in that realm.
Yeah.
And so as more rescues came on, they had they still had to have private ambulances run in certain parts of the city. And then we had EMT.
Because they just didn't have coverage.
Yeah, and we had EMT ambulances back then too.
Yeah.
Because we had 12-member task forces and we had 17-member heavy-duty task forces back then. So a lot of the firefighters had to ride the ambulance, so they would run short, take one member off the truck, take one member off the engine, and the ambulance was a variable staffed rescue.
Yeah.
So Rescue 295 in the 70s was one of the rescues.
Okay.
And they were shut down. No, they weren't shut down. They ran during high peak hours when all the paramedic rescues, because there was only like 10 or 12 at the time.
Yeah.
So when I joined the post in 85, there was only 53 paramedic rescues in the entire city at the time.
Yeah.
And then over on the west side, when I worked for Goodhue Ambulance in late 89, 890 till I got on the job, we ran a lot of the runs for those rescues because they would get on scene, find out it didn't need a paramedic transport, and they call for a private.
Yeah.
When I came on in 90, and then when I got over to 64s in 92, we were allowed to call for privates, and they gave us a list of privates to call if we went on runs. And somebody wanted to go to, San Dimas community or whatever, hey, we can't take you that far because, we're 911, but here, we'll call so-and-so for you.
You call on the phone yourself?
Yeah,
you call on the phone. Companies in order? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, like, when I worked for the privates, we would run those calls. And then when I went to Carson, we did inter-facility transfers and we ran 911 calls for Lake County Fire. So that was kind of cool watching emergency and being the dude driving the rescue for the squads.
You're at Rampart.
And County had a different program back then compared to LAFD because they had the squads.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to compare the two. And I can tell you from being on both sides of the aisle, both of those delivery systems have their benefits and drawbacks.
Yeah. Yeah, because you hear people arguing for and against, all the time.
Yeah,
man.
For having your own rescue, being a paramedic and having my own rescue, it was golden.
Yeah,
because I wasn't waiting for an ambulance to show up. Yeah, back then we used to scoop and run on a lot more runs than we do now.
And anything pretty much that was seriously serious.
Yeah, and then so it was nice having my own wheels. Yeah, the downside to it was a wall time at the hospital, cleaning up all the mess, and all that. But if it's raining and you're waiting for the ambulance to show up, you got a traffic accident, you got a guy hit by a car, you're in the fucking rain until that ambulance shows up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. On a good thing on a county delivery system is, if you get on scene and you don't need to follow up to the hospital, you just do the paperwork, hand it to the private, see you later, bye. You didn't have to clean up nothing. When you got
half the time, even when you get to the hospital with an ALS, you'll see county pull up and be like, they'll give the report and be like, all right, we're out of here, guys. And leave it with the EMTs.
Yeah. Now, the downside to that is you got some 19 or 18-year-old EMT that back then we had Thomas guides.
Yeah.
So we had, and the Thomas guides really wasn't that, good to use because the numbers are really small.
Right.
And especially like we ran our contract for Goodhue Ambulance, we had all the hill, which we called the Palos Verdes the hill. So we had an entire Palos Verdes Peninsula. Yeah. We had Lomita, we had the city of Carson. We got West Hollywood right before I left because every 5 years all the contracts went up.
Right.
Yep. And we had Athens and we got Willowbrook before I left. And so we ran mostly South Bay and we did Torrance Fire too.
Yeah.
And whenever we had a run up in PV, you look at the Thomas guide and it was just like, and then if you had somebody, all your EMTs weren't really good.
Yeah.
So you were running on a squad and you got this EMT in the back with you that doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah. And, there's, because it's a different agency. So now your complaint process is a lot different. So you had to work with some knucklehead in the back of the ambulance with you. And then sometimes the rescues got lost.
Yeah. It's funny. You call 911 and all these guys show up and everybody has a uniform on and you have this sense that everybody's a professional. Everybody's really good at their job. Everybody knows what the heck they're doing. It's gonna flow. You don't realize that you might have. I mean, even me personally, man. When I first got, I was a paramedic because I was working at McCormick. So I had just gotten my first paramedic job from McCormick Ambulance in the South Bay, Redondo Beach. And I remember one of the first days, it was like my third shift as a paramedic. It was my turn to drive. So I was like, sweet, I'm gonna drive, whatever. And then we had a trauma. Kids were on their mountain bikes, whatever, doing these jumps. Kid fell, bonked his head. He's all gorked and stuff. Everyone's rushing. It's like a legit trauma, and we're going to Harbor, and we're in this little swirly, street somewhere in Redondo Beach. And I get in the front seat, and the mom's sitting here, jumps in the passenger seat, hysterically crying, and I don't know where I'm going. I don't know how to get from where I'm at out to a major road to get to Harbor UCLA. And I'm like, oh shit, pull out the Thomas guide. And I'm like, and the mom was like, what? You don't know where you're going? And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, man. Give me 1 second, and it's like, it's funny how little experiences like that as you're coming up and learning and stuff like that will mold, the type of person or the type of paramedic or EMT or firefighter that you want to be. Those mistakes.
Those runs were nerve-wracking coming from the hill. I would always, because there's only 2 squads that handled the entire Palos Verdes Peninsula back there. It was Squad 2 on the RPV side by Lanada Bay, and it was Squad 106 in the middle there. And if I wasn't really sure, because like we had runs in Dominguez, Fire Station 105's district, on the far end of Carson, or it's actually in Rancho Dominguez. Well, back then it was Dominguez Hills Hospital used to be there. Okay, it's a school now. Yeah, I could tell you about the hospitals that we used to go to that don't exist. I mean, I've seen 15 hospitals close since I got on the job. Yeah, but that was one of the hospitals we would go to. So in Carson, there is this large, and we're talking about LA County fire stuff, but there was this large mobile home park on the top of a hill over there on the east end on Laurel Park Road. And it was kind of, we don't run that many calls over because 105 was a slow district. So we get a run up there. It was a cardiac arrest. We didn't have a map of the streets of the mobile home park. So we're driving around. And we're driving around trying to find the place. And then we find a place. And I got in the habit of telling the guy on the squad, hey, I'm going to follow you out because I'm not free. I did that every time I ran on the hill. Yeah. Hey, I need to follow the squad to the hospital. Where we're going? Torrance Memorial. Okay. Once I get to Hawthorne Boulevard, I'm cool. Get out of spaghetti. I got to follow the squad. So, like on our job, when we say I'll take a driver, firefighter drives us to the hospital. Everybody jumps in the back. In the county, they'll say, I need a driver for the squad. So it's a firefighter. Guy had never been on an ambulance, never driven an ambulance.
Following someone blind,
So we get this one run in 105's district. We're going to Dominguez Hills Hospital, going up Alameda. Before we got down to Alameda to head that way, and this guy's hauling ass in his squad. Yeah. And I can't haul ass because I got people in the back doing CPR and all stuff. And his fucker disappears. Fuck. And just so happened, I think we turned this way to get out, and it was there. So when I got to Alameda, the squad was already almost at Artesia Boulevard. I could see the lights of the back end of the squad. And, back then the squads were stick shift. Yeah. They weren't automatic. And this guy must have been a really good stick shift driver.
He got Mario Andretti up there driving the squad.
He took off, right? So I get to the hospital and say, hey, dude, I tried to follow you out. He says, yeah. I says, I can't drive as fast as you did. Yeah. And luckily, when I got to Alameda, I knew where I would be. But that's, the two differences of the two delivery systems, having a private versus your own wheels. And looking at both of it, like I said, it would have been nice to be able to say, you know what, just send them by ambulance. Yeah. Or didn't have to clean up the back of the ambulance. But putting those two systems together. And then in the county, you run more calls too. Yeah. Talk to any guy on the squad. He wants to get off the squad just as bad as we want to get off our rescues. Yeah. Yeah. And they keep telling me, I don't know how you did it, Don, on the rescue.
How long were you on the rescue for?
3 years at 63s, and then I did 4 years being detailed throughout the city. Yeah. I got homesick for being back on the rig because I was a firefighter first. Got off the rescue, stayed at 63s on the same shift, and went back to the task force. Because I really I was like 28 at the time, and I wanted to be back. I just wanted to go back to being a firefighter. Because the rescues didn't go to structures back then.
When you got hired, were you always thinking that you were going to be involved with the Explorer program?
You know what? It was like a pay it back type of thing. Yeah. Because I learned so much for the program. And then for me as a kid growing up, You know, it was like I was always told, well, you know, you can't do this because of that. You can't do this because of that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, then I'm going to show you. I'm going to do this. You know, it doesn't matter what you say.
Yeah.
Oh, you're too young. You know, my grandparents was telling me back when they were younger that, you know, if you're black, you couldn't be a firefighter. You know, you know, fire station 30 and 14 was segregated, you know, like the African American Firefighter Museum, the old 30s, you know. And there's a lot of history out of there. You know, I'd recommend anybody who's in LA visit the museums and stop by the African American Firefighters Museum because, man, it's a lot of history in there.
I mean, there's rules written into our rules that are there just strictly to help integrate the stations and stuff like that.
All members, you know, shall participate in organized mess.
Yep.
Because the firefighters, when they desegregated the LAFD in 1956. So when the black firefighters started working with the white firefighters, they weren't allowed to sit at the kitchen table.
Yep.
And they had their own set of plates and forks to use. And the white firefighters would eat first, and then they would come in and eat last.
Yeah.
And they couldn't even sit in they had to, even if the white firefighters weren't there, you had to sit on this corner on this table.
Yep.
You know, the beds they slept in at the station, because they usually have one black firefighter for every shift. All 3 black firefighters at different shifts had to sleep in the same bed. So a lot of things in the rules and regulations were added after desegregation. You know, another thing is no firearms in the firehouse. And when they desegregated, things almost came to a head at Fire Station 10, and guys were bringing guns to the firehouse for protection.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And when that happened, whole, you know, storm brewed after that, and they resegregated the fire department because they were like, oh man, this is ugly for a brief time. And then they did some other things. Yeah.
This is in the 60s?
This was in the 50s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The fire department was basically segregated from 1898 to 1956. And the fire station 30 didn't open up as a segregated station until 1924.
So they desegregated for a few years.
Well, they didn't know. It wasn't even for a few years. They desegregated for like a few weeks.
And then
stuff got bad, and then they resegregated, and then they desegregated again.
Damn.
Yeah, and so, like, you know, Gonzo was saying, there's certain things in our rules and regulations that's a direct result from, you know, some of the stuff that was going on.
Yeah, like if you have, I don't know, man. If you're, we got people that have. We just had a rookie, Crystal, who's coming on the show. She has a whole business, keto. She's got a keto.
Oh, I got a keto story
food business and all that stuff, right? So, like, let's say you're keto and you have a special diet. That's what you eat. You have to write a letter to get permission to eat your own food on your own thing and not participate in the organization.
You gotta have a letter on file, and it has to be approved. I mean, that's how serious it is, because, you know, because now the person can't say, oh, they're discriminating against me and stuff. You know, well, I have a special diet. And like for me, you know, dude, I've been a fat ass my entire life. I've been fighting weight since ever. Like, I got a keto story for you. You know, I don't know. It's not really fire department related, but man, I get up in the morning. I'm on this program, right? I've lost like 13 pounds so far. And one of the reasons why I'm retiring early is because my health is improving from not being in the firehouse.
Yeah.
I'm on the injury, you know, I sustained where now I can't really do my job anymore. But anyway, you know, I get up in the morning, I step on the scale, right? The Bluetooth straight to the office.
Yeah.
You take your ketones, which is a finger prick, like you're doing your blood test.
Yeah, blood
then
sugar.
you have to do the blood sugar. Then you take a blood pressure. And they look at all the stuff. And then if you're screwing up on this diet, man, they call you up or send you an email like, hey, man, what's going on? You know, I noticed that, you know, this is going on. So I've been on this.
Piece of fruit?
Yeah. So I've been on this for 7 months. And, you know, because I've had all kinds of diets.
Yeah.
I've hired all kinds of personal trainers. I've never lost any weight.
Yeah.
This is the first time in my life since, you know, I've had the issues that I'm starting to lose weight. And it's taken a long time. And they say, hey, dude, your metabolism is so screwed up. It's going to take you about 2 years to stick with it.
Yeah.
But the keto thing for me works pretty good. You do get cravings. You get that keto flu, you know, kind of headache and stuff. You feel like the first 6 weeks of it, I was like, dude, what the hell? I got COVID or something? Let's take a COVID test. You know, and it turned out it was just the keto flu. And so I want to get to the point when I retire, which is going to be sometime this year. Well, actually, in February, I'm retiring. You know, one of the things I do is photography, so I want to be able to still. And I'm an aviation buff. That's where my thing is. So I go to air shows and I shoot air shows and stuff like that. And I want to still be able to walk a mile to the flight line, slinging this big ass camera lens, and then shoot and then be able to walk back. Can't do it when you're
Did your interest in aviation steer you toward working at
the
LAX?
airport? Yeah.
Because you made engineer in what year?
Made engineer in 06 and 07, late 07. Got made engineer, went to 55s in Eagle Rock. Slowest station I ever worked in my career. And it was a cool assignment. Ran on 3 runs a shift. And we slept almost every night. And I'm going, why'd you guys send me here? I'm a brand new engineer. And they told me basically, because when I promoted, I had 16 years on the job. And they said that, they said, hey, you had time on the job. We looked at your PRB, saw your assignments, and we have all these guys 4 years on making it, and they still need to get some experience. And you've never did any time on the east side, so we're going to send you over there. Which was a hell of a learning curve, learning those streets, man. You take a colander full of spaghetti, throw it on the floor. That's battalion 2.
That's Eagle Rock area. Right?
I spent plenty of days after getting off of work when I was a brand new engineer there, with a cup of coffee and driving my first alarm so I can know where the streets were, know where all the bumps in the road conditions. So if I come across them at night, I don't launch my crew out the windows and stuff like that. Hydrant locations. And I mean, I did that. I was doing that just a few weeks ago when I got sent to 101s before, I fell off the rig and go, dude, you got to retire. And 32 years on the job, 17 years as an engineer, almost 17, there's certain things you do when you're a new driver, you keep doing. When I left the airport, went to 38s in Wilmington, I did the same thing. Cup of coffee, got up in the morning, drove the first alarm. We had the big brush fire in 2019 on Skirball, and so we were at what they call degraded dispatch mode. So when you half your resources are tied up, the fire department downgrades the dispatches. You call and says, hey, I got a stub toe. We're not coming. Call someone else. Click. That kind of thing. And then so engine-only structure fires, you get those a lot. Until you get something, then you call for extra resources. So we get a structure fire on Terminal Island at the prison.
From 38s.
From 38s. Engine 238 alone and boat 1 or 3 out of 111 structure fire.
At the prison.
Okay. And so I heard the address, looked at it as a prison, and I knew the streets to take to get there. Didn't need to get on the map. We just hauled ass over there. Because I'm like, what the hell are the fireboats going to do? That's one of the small ones.
Right.
And I'm thinking, if this is a prison, man, we're going to be calling for the world if there's something significant. Yeah. So turned out to be nothing. It was one of the exhaust fans where they take the prisoner intakes, where they take the prisoners to process them once they show up. And it was just shorted, burned. And it's funny because we got there, we had light smoke showing, and all the prison guards were on BAs on air.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. And the light smoke turned out to be all these extinguishers they dumped into the thing instead of just turning off the electricity. Hey, you know what? Turn off the electricity, unscrew this, pull it out, and fill it outside. But so you got to learn your district when you're a driver. You get up and you drive around.
It's so funny to me how much of the stuff that we do to mitigate things is just common sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, why don't you do this?
Just turn off the light switch.
Yeah.
It's like an electrical fire. You take the power away from it, becomes a Class A fire. Now you can use water.
Yeah. Or pipes leaking in the bathroom. It's flooding the bathroom. I don't know what to do. Just turn this. Oh my God. Just how many people don't know how to save themselves from the simplest little problems.
Right.
Yeah. When you so you made an engineer, you went to 55s, you eventually wind up at 51s.
Yeah, wind up at 51s in 07.
Was there additional ARF training that you had to do as an engineer before you were able to work at 51s?
No, you don't have to be ARF certified to work at 51s.
Oh, okay.
No. 51s is...
And explain just briefly what ARF is.
ARF is Airport Rescue Firefighting, basically. And I got certified in it. I forgot what year it was. I think a year after I got there. It's totally changed now.
Yeah.
Actually, I lost my ARF cert when I went off an injury in 2016. And if you guys remember, there was a plane crash at San Francisco where the 777 came in, hit the seawall, split in half. Yep. Then they ran over the girl.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess that changed a whole lot of stuff because, I'm not going to mention it, but things changed after that incident and basically changed a lot of stuff in the ARF world.
Yeah.
And so, every year we'd have to go to San Bernardino International Airport. That place actually exists.
Yeah.
And we would take the ARF training there. And then that every year you had to go do a burn. And we couldn't do the burn at LAX anymore because the apparatus or the facility was leaking into the ocean. And we can't do this shit anymore.
I think I was one of the last groups that went through and actually did that burn.
At LAX?
So it was the first time I was at 63s. So I probably had 4 years on the job or so. And it was a planned drill, for the evening. The whole battalion was going or whatever.
Yeah, 4 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, 4 o'clock in the morning. So they bring us down at 3:30. Hey, you guys are NAV to go to your drill. And you get there and it's this whole big, almost like a little round barrier they put on the ground and jet fuel. And they'd light it off. And you would, show the exam. ARF rigs would come and show how they squirt from the rig without getting in the rig. You'd practice squirting foam. You'd practice blanketing the fuel. And they'd throw something out there to break the foam, blanket, and it would reignite. And so you got to see all these things. And then I remember there being issues with planes flying over or taking off or landing. And
they had to wait till they had a break in it, then they would light it off.
Freaking people out.
Yeah. But so I had lost my cert when I got hurt. And so I came back and says, hey, what do I do? And he says, well, you got to go through the whole program again. Because they had just changed it, because something happened at that crash that changed it. And because when you screw up at an incident, the feds get involved. And it's not like the fire department, it's like, Mr. Nash, so you were at the incident when we had, so-and-so and so-and-so happened. So tell us what you did when you got up that morning. And then all the way up to the incident and including the incident. And they really dig into your records and all that stuff. And so I'm not going to mention any particulars, but that changed a whole lot of stuff. But during that process, I was like, well, shit, I'm not getting that many overtime days there anyway. I'm at 51s and I like being at 51s. So I let it lapse. But the burn, that was fun to do because sometimes they pump like a couple of 1,000 gallons of Jet A. And it had to be an offshore wind, so many degrees, because you want the smoke to blow out over the ocean instead of the city, right? And what's the environmental girl, Greta Thunberg? Man, she would have been
lost her mind.
Dude, she would have lost her shit over this. But anyway, you light it off and we put it off and we put it out, and it was a mandatory annual FAA mandated drill, and you got to work with the fire and actually deal with the actual burning jet fuel, which is very hard to ignite. I remember guys throwing flares in and to pull a jet fuel and it wouldn't ignite, and they had to pour gasoline on a little patch of it and then took off, and then the gasoline got the Jet A going.
Wow.
But all that stopped, and then we went over to
Ontario,
San Bernardino International Airport, which was the old Norton Air Force Base.
Okay. And
we did that, which they used propane and a bunch of stuff. It was actually more comprehensive training.
We would go down there for like the burn chamber and stuff. Before LA City had their own.
That's the logistics
that's Ontario,
airport, right?
Yeah,
that was
Ontario.
Ontario.
That was Ontario.
Yeah,
I can just remember, we'd go for a day, or maybe it was in the drill tower or something.
Yeah, they did in the drill tower
that we went, and you're in the burn chamber, and you're all sitting on the ground, fully suited up, and then they build a fire at the end of the container and light it off, and you get to watch the the smoke, how it interacts
over training
and stuff, and then it reaches a certain temperature. You watch it, flash over. You can watch the flickers, and you're sitting there watching the fire behavior. I can remember being there doing that, and there's guys that work that chamber. I mean, for LA City too, there's guys that work that chamber as for overtime days and stuff like that. I remember one of these Ontario guys. He must have been 70 years old, man. This guy. It's probably his 5th time going in the chamber of the day, and I just remember like. 4 or 5 of us are sitting there, it's hot as shit. So you get out and you feel drained because you're basically in this oven, watching fire behavior. And here goes this old man, just beet red. All his turnouts are black, charred. And he's, he's looking like he's about to die and putting his mask back on. We're like, Cap, don't let him go back in there, man. This guy. But that was that training up there.
Yeah, that was flashover training, and then we did our own flashover training at the Van Norman Dam. The fire department did. I don't know I guess they're doing it for the rookies, but the last time I went as a fire company to that was that was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But, the airport was fun. I enjoyed it. I kind of tell people if you want to go if you don't really not interested in aircraft, 51s is really not a place for you because you don't go any fires.
Yeah.
You know, you're added to structure responses and stuff like that in the first alarm district. You know, I've been a couple of fires. Like the furthest I've gone from 51s was Venice Beach.
No,
And then the farthest dispatch I had was 57's district from quarters. But you know, as soon as somebody come available, we're the first ones to get canceled.
Right.
Yeah, because you have to have somebody at the airport.
You go back to the airport because the 80s does aircraft stuff. So they're basically any aircraft emergency, fuel spills, that sort of thing. But 51s is a subject matter expert for the airport as far as where the terminals are, where the tunnels are,
shut off,
where everything is at. Cargo and stuff like that, and then so I liked being there for that. We didn't really do any fire stuff too much, you know. Every now and then you get to some fire, but you get there as soon as it's knocked down, they say, "Hey, you hooked up to anything?" No.
Yeah.
We need you to get out of here. One day we were at a fire, on the east end of La Cienega and Century, where they were tearing down the buildings for the Conrac they're building there. I think it's open now, but we had a fire there. It was an actual incident. We get there, 95s is knocking it down, and the staff assistant comes up to me and says, "Hey, we need you guys to cut loose. There's a full coming in." And we got 64s coming from quarters and Watts on the first alarm. And it was just going to be 80s there because the entire battalion was at this fire on that end. So you had 63s task force coming from Venice Beach and 64s coming from Watts, and they said, "We need to kick you loose." So we gathered up and head over there, and it was just us and 80s. The other companies never made it there by the time the plane landed.
Yeah, it's such a long haul.
Yeah, but you know what? Most of the times the plane lands, I've been to more plane crashes at 63s from the general aviation crashes at Santa Monica Airport than I ever did at the 12 years I was at LAX. I had a shoot deployment. You had like smoke in the cockpit, some of that kind of stuff.
Were you there for the one that was the landing gear didn't come down?
No, I wasn't there for that.
Broken.
Yeah, that was in 05.
I remember that one.
Yeah, that was JetBlue that came out of Long Beach Airport.
That area that you're talking about, where that structure fire was kind of a trippy area too, because that was like a neighborhood with a bunch of
houses,
apartments, and stuff like that. And they knew they were expanding LAX, and they were gonna build this huge parking structure there that was for the shuttle to pick people up and stuff like that. So they everybody got evicted from their homes, and it was this just empty neighborhood, man. And
that's right. I remember that.
It got kind of taken over by the homeless.
I remember that.
And so wound up being this funky homeless town.
It was like The Wire.
Right by. It was just like The Wire, dude. It was just like The Wire.
That, dude.
And you get a call in there and it'd be like, it was like a lawless, like you were coming into a lawless town.
Amsterdam,
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I do want to get. We're getting kind of close to time.
Yeah. Okay.
I do want to talk about the Historical Society.
Yes.
Okay. When did you start getting involved with the Historical Society, and what do you do with them?
I got involved with the Historical Society in 2010, and it was purely by accident. When I first started with museums, I started with the African American Firefighter Museum in 1997 when they opened up. And I did that for a few years, and then I kind of just, how you just go away for something. Yeah. I became ill, was battling illness, didn't really tell anybody, and I kind of dissolved away, and then I got that under control. And then in 2009 or something, I ran into Frank Borden, which is a retired chief. He passed away almost 2 years ago, and met him at the Harbor Museum. And he's trying to talk me into joining the Historical Society. I was like, no, I don't know. I'm doing other things. I'm kind of busy, blah, 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 blah. So in 2010, I go to the Hollywood Museum. That was
right next to 27s.
Yeah, right next to 27s. So I was dating this girl at this time, and we were trying to find things to do. We just started dating and everything. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go check out this museum. Somebody go check it out. You don't have to go. And she's like, no, I'll go with you. And I'm like, all right. So we went to do that. For going over to Grove and watching her spending $1,200 on some slippers. I was just like, that's your money. But anyway, back to the
but I digress.
Yeah. And so I go over there and Frank is there. And he tried to talk me into joining. Hey, you know what? You should join the Historical Society, blah, blah. Okay, all right, whatever. And let me show you something. So he takes me up to the photo archive section where there is over 100 years of historic photographs that the photo video unit and the fire department photo unit took over the decades.
Yeah.
They got all that stuff from the fire department when they were going to throw it away.
Yeah.
And he says, "Hey, we need people to digitize this stuff." And me being, in the photography, I was hooked.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started off in the photo archive, digitizing stuff and putting it on the Flickr page, all the stuff on the Fire Department Historical Society, Los Angeles Fire Department Historical Society Flickr page.
Yeah.
That's all the stuff I've put on there. It's been kind of inactive because people were taking some of the photographs and making memes out of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I don't really post that much on that page. The Facebook page, me and a few other guys monitor it. And then every now and then I would be a docent. I would give tours at the Hollywood Museum. Okay. And I don't do it all the time. Yeah, but my main job there is the photo archive historian.
Okay.
And then now I'm doing the articles in the Grapevine.
Mm-hmm. Talk about those articles for a minute. Mm-hmm. What are they based on?
They're basically, historical stuff. We try to go back and find things, that we think that'll be interesting. Like I give you an example. About 10 years.
And this is for the Grapevine.
For the Grapevine magazine,
yeah.
for the firefighters, LA City's magazine, internal magazine, and I basically, took the responsibility. We had a member of our board had a medical emergency. He's no longer to do it. And like we were talking earlier before we started filming, or recording that, you got to always come up with different subject matter every month. And it could be a really pain to do. And then you have deadlines for printing, for the printer and all that stuff. And you just basically try to find something that's historic that you can get a lot of information on and write an article over that's interesting. Sure, which is not the easiest thing to do because I'm not that much of a writer. Yeah. And it's always in the back of my head, I got to get this deadline done. What am I going to write about this time? Yeah. And then we talked about the fire buffs that it's got to be accurate because if it's not, people call you up and they're like, "Hey dude, I was at that incident. You totally butchered that article, so."
Yeah. And these fire buffs know what they're talking about too. Like a lot of them, man.
They know more than I'll ever know. And I consider myself a fire buff and I've been on the job and I'm always being called out on stuff, little minute shit. And I'm just like, but they have spreadsheets to all this stuff.
Do you know that?
Yeah, this one guy, he has a spreadsheet to every crown that ever existed on the fire department.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
Yeah, I'll get that sometimes. Like somebody will send me like a photo of an old, 63s truck with no roof, some old crown.
Where
or
is
something.
this?
Oh, yeah. And I post it on like the story for the 63s page when I had the 63s page. Rest in peace. I'll tell you about that later. And then I would get a message from a guy. Oh, that became truck such and such in this year, and then it became and now it's in then it was in reserve for 4 years. Give me like the whole history on the rig, based on the shop number or whatever. And it's like, how the hell do you know that?
Well,
man?
there's people that just really good at records, and they, they're real interesting. I'll give you an example. There's a bunch of LAX pictures that the fire department took over the years. Yeah, I have a bunch of photographs that I digitized from like the 60s all the way up to the 80s when they put the upper level in. Yeah. Oh, really? And when the satellites were actually satellites in the middle of the airfield, didn't have the connector buildings. So I posted this one picture real quick of a DC-10 from Western Airlines, no longer exists, on a Facebook page. Some aviation buff got a hold of me and says, "Hey, do you know what happened to that airplane?" I'm like, "I don't know. This picture was taken in the 70s. Yeah. And he goes, "That was the plane that crashed in Mexico City that landed on a taxiway instead of a runway and killed X amount of people." He says, "Dude, you have a gold mine photograph there."
Man, that's crazy.
And,
that is crazy.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. Nice to know, Yeah. And, but there's people out there that are really more of a historian than I'll ever be. Cause
well, it's crazy to think that, had it not been for the Historical Society, maybe a photo like that might've been tossed away.
Yeah. Well, a whole bunch of stuff would have been tossed away. They threw away about 10 years worth of stuff the fire department did before they called the Historical Society in 2000 to take this stuff. We're missing 10 years. Yeah. From 55 to 65, basically.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That museum there at old 27s, right next door to new 27s. It's really an awesome museum. There's a lot of amazing stuff in there.
Yeah, we have the Historical Society. We have the Hollywood Museum, the Harbor Museum, which is at the old City Hall, San Pedro City Hall down in Harbor, which the bottom 2 floors was old Fire Station 36 until it closed in 1972. And then new 36s reopened in 2008 or something like that. Yeah. Then we also have the Ralph J. Scott, which is the retired Fireboat 2 that's behind 112s in a big vinyl tent next to the Iowa. To go look at. And then we have Bell 47 that's totally restored at Air Ops that we use. We can't fly because the insurance is kind of cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
And we take it to short air shows and stuff like that on a trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a lot of things that we have in our collection. Plus we got a bunch of apparatus and stuff at different places that we store. Like one of the rigs I got old engine 51. You know, the 96 that was there was frontline rig when I drove. And when I left in 2019, I was driving it in relief.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, we got a lot of things going on. We just need volunteers right now for the most thing. And
if there's any guys that are interested that work around the fire department that are interested in getting involved with the Historical Society, how would they go about doing that?
You can reach us on our Facebook page or reach me on my Facebook page.
Okay.
My Facebook page is Don Nash II, and a lot of people already know where I'm at.
Yeah.
They can Google Los Angeles Fire Department Historical Society.
Okay.
And right now our website is being redone, so you may leave a message on our website. We might get with you. The best way to do it is through our Facebook page.
Okay.
Because that's being monitored almost every day by me or somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Man.
We've got a lot of information.
A lot of information.
Some stuff that people probably didn't even hear about or know ever.
Yeah, like me.
That Terminal Island out of prison.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That Dominguez Hills, Cal State Dominguez Hills had a hospital before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of good information, Don. I'm really appreciate you coming down and talking to us.
I'm glad I'm able to make it. Hopefully we can come back and do this again.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, for sure, man.
We've got a lot of historical incidents that we could talk about and stuff like that. So we'd love to have you back to maybe do an episode just talking about some
two-parter.
incidents.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, probably. Go ahead.
Is there any anything you want to plug? I mean, you just gave out the Facebook information.
I can't think of nothing off the top of my head right now. Just no, not really. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'll probably think about it when I drive home.
That's right. You let me know. We'll tack it on the end.
Yeah, right on.
You guys can follow me at Danny Gonzo 34 on Instagram. I am no longer on Twitter.
No longer on Twitter. All right, follow me at Ben9Humor, Ben9Humor on Instagram and Twitter. Follow our show at PRC Pod on Instagram and Twitter, or at PRC Podcast on TikTok. You can also email us, contactprcpod@gmail.com. You can get our Shopify, get you a PRC t-shirt and sticker pack, merch and rescue. Hit it up.
There's links on all our pages.
Right on.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Don, for coming out. Appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
We'll see you. Have a good one.